The best rivalry on the West Coast comes to an end on Saturday with Gonzaga looking to knock off St. Mary's one more time in Moraga.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Well, folks, Gonzaga closes out the regular season, their final game in the West Coast Conference on Saturday against who else but St. Mary's on the road in Moraga. We're going to break down the implications of this game, what it means for Gonzaga, what it means for St. Mary's. We'll talk a little bit about the history between these two programs. And then, of course, we'll talk about the specific keys. What does Gonzaga need to do to get a win on Saturday to close out the regular season with a W? Game taking place Saturday, February 28th, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be broadcast on ESPN. And folks, it's the end of an era. There's really no other way to look at this. You know, we had some conversation back last month. January 31st was when Gonzaga beat St. Mary's in Spokane. And some people kind of said, oh, is this really even a rivalry? And we're citing Gonzaga's like overall win-loss record against St. Mary's. It has been a rivalry for a long time. Gonzaga hasn't had a lot of pure rivals in the sense of people who beat them 50-50 because they have been dominant. That is why, Mark Few is on the ballot for the Hall of Fame this year because they have dominated the opponents that they have played. But St. Mary's has clipped them more than anybody else. And this game has been a battle, a showdown, one of the best, most heated rivalries in college basketball for 20 years. Randy Bennett took over that program in Moraga in like 2002. And they weren't immediately successful, but it didn't take long before they were a consistent threat in the West Coast Conference. And now, with Gonzaga set to move to the new look Pac-12 Conference on July 1st of this year, this rivalry will be over. It does not mean that they won't continue to play each other. It is a possibility that they will schedule each other. It's possible they even schedule true home and home series where one year St. Mary's comes to Spokane and the next year Gonzaga goes down to Moraga. I think it's also maybe even more likely that they would play neutral sites. Maybe they play in Vegas, maybe they play at the Chase Center, maybe they play in Seattle, whatever it may be. But either way, it won't be the same. It would be great if this game continued to be played on each other's campus. That's good for college basketball. It's a good reminder that college basketball is fundamentally for the students and them getting an opportunity to go to those games and go nuts and celebrate and have that intensity and that rivalry aspect. It's good for the sport for that to exist. But even if they do that, it won't be the same. It'll be once a year. It'll be in, November, December, something like that. It won't be towards the end of the season. It won't have implications in the conference standings. They won't face each other many times one of the last matchups of the season and potentially including this matchup on Saturday, one of these teams is fighting for their NCAA tournament life. A few years ago, Gonzaga had to beat St. Mary's in Moraga to cement their spot in the big dance. St. Mary's will be fighting for that opportunity on Saturday. They face each other in Vegas. Heck, last year, Gonzaga was, or 2 years ago, Gonzaga was going to make the NCAA tournament, but you needed to win that game in Vegas to be sure. It's so different when you have that kind of intensity and stakes around this matchup. It will not exist in a non-conference variety. And so it's truly the end of a 20-plus year era of this being an intense, emotional game 2 to 3 times per year, 3 times more often than not, between these two programs and these two incredibly high-level coaches in Mark Few and Randy Bennett. And yes, the people who want to cite the stats, Gonzaga's 19-8 against St. Mary's in Moraga in the Mark Few era. But they're 1-3 in the last 4. The last 4 trips down to Moraga, California, Gonzaga has only come back with a win one of those times. They would love to make it 2 in the last 5 with the win on Saturday night. Gonzaga, of course, also looking for a sweep of St. Mary's, which doesn't happen all that often anymore, after beating them in Spokane by 8, 73-65 back on January 31st. Ike, his first game back after a 3-game absence with his ankle injury, he hung 30 on the Gaels in that game. Let's re-meet this St. Mary's team, 26-4 on the year, 15-2 in the WCC, and that is because they have won every game they have played since Gonzaga beat them in Spokane. 7 straight wins after that loss for the Gaels. That included Wednesday's game, which was a monumental win for St. Mary's, 86-67, a 19-point massacre at home against Santa Clara, a team that is still, even after that loss, still projected to make the NCAA tournament. That is a really big time win for Coach Bennett's team. I think it was tied or like a 1-possession game at halftime, and St. Mary's just blew them out of the water in the second half. A really, really impressive win for this Gaels team, carrying some serious momentum into Saturday's showdown against the Zags. 4 losses for St. Mary's. They did lose to Santa Clara on the road earlier this year. They, of course, lost to Gonzaga. 2 games in the non-conference. They lost on a neutral floor against Vanderbilt, and they lost to Boise State in Idaho Falls. Those are your 4 losses. They're 24th at KenPom, 45th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 20th in adjusted defensive efficiency, 280th in tempo, which means they play quite slow, but frankly, that is about as fast as we have ever seen from a St. Mary's team. Typically, they're in the 330s, 340s in terms of tempo, according to KenPom. So this team actually gets up and down the floor a little bit faster than we're used to seeing from these teams. St. Mary's is 22nd in the net as of Thursday. Again, the net refreshes every single day, recording this on Thursday afternoon, so it will be slightly different on Friday and again on Saturday, or it might not be. Either way, for this to be a quad 1 game for Gonzaga, St. Mary's just needs to be top 75. So they're very obviously within that conversation. It also means that Gonzaga's win over St. Mary's from January, they would need to stay top 30 for that to remain a quad 1 win. The fact that they're at 22nd with only a few games left to go means they're going to remain in the top 30 almost certainly. So that is good news for Gonzaga. We'll talk in the third segment about the implications of this game for either team, but I will tell you this. St. Mary's is currently 0-3 in quad 1 games. Put a little bit of pressure on the Gaels in this contest on Saturday, pressure that maybe doesn't quite exist in the same capacity for Gonzaga in this one. But again, there's always a reason to want to beat St. Mary's. There's always a reason that St. Mary's wants to beat Gonzaga. There's pride. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the line for these teams. But the fact that St. Mary's doesn't have a quad 1 win is definitely a relevant factor in this game for both Gonzaga and St. Mary's. KenPom currently projecting a 2-point win for Gonzaga, 74-72. And what I want to do now is talk about what Gonzaga needs to do to make that a reality. What do they need to do to get a road win, to finish the regular season with just 2 losses? Because we know they're going to need to keep this team off the offensive glass. They're going to need to play strong perimeter defense. To me, it feels like Jalen Warley, who did not play on Wednesday against the Portland Pilots, will be a massive X factor in this game on Saturday. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, let me welcome you to the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which ones might be sleepers. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one is going to take the top spot. 5-Hour Energy has a flavor for everyone, and they give you a boost with 0 sugar. I've always been a fan of Blue Raspberry, a sweet and tangy flavor with a taste that nature couldn't make, but probably should have. I'd take the bold Blue Raspberry flavor and sweet finish #1 in my draft, but my sleeper pick is the new Confetti Craze. It's a blend of rich and buttery confetti cake, vanilla frosting, and a sprinkle of sweetness. And you can't ignore the Hawaiian breeze. It's made with passion fruit, orange, and guava flavors, making it sweet yet smooth and tangy yet tart. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Folks, the biggest stretch of the college basketball season is almost here. Buzzer beaters, bracket busters, and those unforgettable moments that everyone's talking about the next day. Being there live for something like that, that's true bucket list stuff. And the hard part is actually getting tickets to those games. There's long queues, there's prices that jump at checkout, and those surprise fees. And the Game Time app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is super easy to use. The Game Time guarantee also means that 100% legitimate tickets delivered on time at the best price. And here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see. So what you see is what you pay, period. That seat view feature is a game changer as well. You can see a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. There's no stress, there's no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. And that's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. And if you're in the Bay Area or you got access to get to the Bay Area, tickets for this game between Gonzaga and St. Mary's, $127 available for $127 on the Game Time app. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, folks, I want to thank all of you for making Locked On Zags your first listen or watch of the day, and remind you that you can check out the show ad-free by going to the Everydayer Club. You also get members-only Discord access. Join now at lockedonzags.supercast.com or at the link in the show notes. All right, folks, we talked about St. Mary's, the end of an era with this matchup coming up on Saturday, the last regular season game between these two schools, at least until, if ever, there is more conference realignment that realigns these two programs. Now, what I want to do is talk about what Gonzaga needs to do to go to Moraga and come back to Spokane with a victory. We'll talk about the implications, what a win would mean for Gonzaga, what a win would mean for St. Mary's in the final segment of the show. But right now, it's what does Gonzaga need to do to make sure they do get that W? Key number one for Gonzaga on Saturday night, got to win on the offensive glass. Not only getting a lot of offensive rebounds and second chance opportunities, but preventing from St. Mary's from doing the same. Because this is a battle of two very, very good rebounding teams. St. Mary's is the top 15 team in the country, according to KenPom, at securing offensive rebounds. One of the best teams in the league at getting offensive rebounds. They were in the Mitchell-Saxon era. They remain a great offensive rebounding team. They have Andrew McKeever and Harry Wessels, both guys well over 7 feet tall. Paulus Morauskas is a great rebounder as well. This team can absolutely mash on the offensive boards. Gonzaga, historically this season, has been top 10 at preventing opposing teams from getting offensive rebounds, also known as defensive rebounding. So Gonzaga is a top 10 defensive rebounding team. St. Mary's is a top 15 offensive rebounding team. And then when you flip that, Gonzaga's 42nd in the country in offensive rebounds. They were much higher. Braden Huff, the team's leading rebounder offensively. He's been out, of course, for well over a month now. And then since February 4th, when Jalen Warley suffered that thigh bruise, he has been not nearly as impactful. He was averaging like over 5 rebounds a game, has averaged less than 2 rebounds a game since he suffered that injury. So you lose Braden Huff, you see a much less effective rebounder in Jalen Warley, and suddenly Gonzaga goes from being a top 10, 15 offensive rebounding team to 42nd. Meanwhile, St. Mary's third in the country in defensive rebounds. So this is a huge storyline in this game, is who is going to get more second chance opportunities. In Spokane last time, Gonzaga had 11 offensive rebounds. The Gaels had just 7. But again, that was when Jalen Warley was healthy and playing almost the entire game. In this game, we will need Emmanuel Inente to step up. We will need Ty and Grant Foster to step up, Graham Ike to step up as well. And also, that leads into key number 2. Can Jalen Warley be the guy who steps up? What do we see from Jalen? Because the skill sets that he provides to this Gonzaga team are vital in a matchup against St. Mary's. And all you need to know is to know how impactful he was when these two teams played on January 31st. This was the last fully healthy game that Jalen played because he got injured early in that game against Portland, and that was the next game after Gonzaga's win over St. Mary's. Warley has not been himself since then. In that St. Mary's game, he played 33 minutes. He had 10 points, 7 rebounds, a pair of assists. He shot 5 of 7 from the field. In the last 6 games since then, he has averaged 19 minutes per game. So, close to half what he played in that St. Mary's game. He is averaging just 5 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He has not been the same player. And Gonzaga held him out of the most recent game against Portland on Wednesday, on senior night. They chose not to play him. Few has been adamant that Worley is really hurting this entire month, said he was barely walking before the Oregon State game. Yet he still started every game Gonzaga played until Wednesday night. The decision to hold him out feels pertinent, because Gonzaga knew how valuable he is for this matchup, not just as a rebounder, but as a defender on Paulus Morauskas. Morauskas is a really good player. He's averaging nearly 19 points per game, one of the leaders in rebounding, very efficient scorer, can do just about everything. And Gonzaga really, really held him tight in this game in Spokane. He had 15 points in the game, but he was 5 of 14 from the field. Morauskas has struggled against Gonzaga. He struggled against them last year. He struggled in Spokane. Worley was a big part of the reason why. And he will draw this assignment defensively, assuming he is able to go in this game on Saturday night. If he's not able to go, I feel Gonzaga's chances of winning this game drop fairly considerably just because of how important his specific skills are to this matchup against St. Mary's. Key number 3 for Gonzaga, similar situation. You need a lockdown performance from Emmanuel Inocente. Inocente flipped the script in the game on Wednesday against Portland. Joel Foxwell scored 8 points in the first 4 minutes of that game. Inocente came in off the bench. Foxwell scored 4 points the rest of the game. Almost as soon as Inocente was in the game, Portland went on a 8-minute streak of not scoring at all. That was because of his impact, his ability to keep Joel Foxwell in front of him, prevent him from getting driving lanes and breaking down Gonzaga's defense. He will be incredibly valuable again in this matchup against a St. Mary's team that has phenomenal guard play. I suspect Inocente will be defending Joshua Dent in this game. And Dent was pretty good last time out. He had 16 points, 6 of 12 shooting, 6 boards and 3 assists. He did have 4 turnovers. Inocente played 27 minutes in that game. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays something like 39 in this game. Truly, I think he might play the entire game if he is capable and he avoids foul trouble and things like that. His defense on Dent will be vital to preventing what happened against St. Mary's last year, where Gonzaga was allowing dribble drives for Augustus Marcelonis. The wing defenders were coming in to prevent Marcelonis from getting all the way to the rim. He was kicking it out to three-point shooters. They were knocking down open threes, Mikey Lewis in particular, and Gonzaga lost. That is what happened last year. It happened against Santa Clara. It also happened in that game against St. Mary's. Inocente's ability to keep Dent in front of him, prevent him from being able to break down the defense, will be vital to this team being able to get a win in Moraga on Saturday night. Key number 4 for Gonzaga is the shot selection. Last time these two teams played, Gonzaga took 41 two-pointers and 17 threes. I love that ratio. I would love to see it look a lot more like that on Saturday, as opposed to what it looked like against Portland on Wednesday, where Gonzaga shot 36 threes. Now, they made 14 of them, which was 40%. That's fantastic. They're not going to shoot 40% from 3 against St. Mary's. I will happily eat crow if I'm wrong about that, but I do not think it will happen. And I think St. Mary's will absolutely dare Gonzaga to shoot 35 threes because they're banking on them shooting 30%, if that, from 3. And if Gonzaga shoots 35 threes and makes like 9 of them, they're going to lose. They need to pack the ball down low. You might be thinking, well, Andy, it's much easier to shoot 41 twos and 17 threes when you have 2 of the best bigs in the country. They didn't have Braden Huff when they beat St. Mary's in Spokane. They did not have Braden Huff, and yet they found a way to dominate down low. It helped that Jalen Warley was healthy. He was 5 of 7 in that game. As we know, none of those 7 shot attempts were from 3. That, again, goes back to that key number 2 about how important he is in this game. But it also means Ty and Grant Foster not settling for outside shots and instead trying to get down low and get fouled and get to the free throw line. I know he's not a great free throw shooter, but I'd rather he do that than shoot threes. It also means Davis Fogel could be a big player in this game. Fogel played 16 minutes against St. Mary's last time. He was just 1 of 3 from the field, though. 16 minutes, only 3 shot attempts. I don't think that can happen for Fogel. I think he needs to be a bigger part of the offensive game plan. Same type of thing, like same what we saw from him in Pacific, getting downhill, drawing contact, getting to the free throw line, where he actually, is a pretty good free throw shooter and is going to help Gonzaga in that space. I think those players become very, very important in this game, of course, as well as Graham Ike, who's of course critical in this game, but will need to not settle for too many outside shots as well. And then key number 5 for Gonzaga is kind of a 2-parter. Don't commit stupid fouls and also make your free throws. Don't get absolutely smoked at the free throw line in this game, because they did last time. They got outscored by 10 at the free throw line. And that was with only St. Mary's taking 4 more attempts. The Gaels shot 23 of 25 from the free throw line in Spokane. 23 of 25. Gonzaga shot 13 of 21. St. Mary's is the best free throw shooting team in the country, period. 81% from the line, the best free throw shooting team in the country. Gonzaga is not. Let's put it that way. They're not. They're under 70% on the season. I think like 69.7% is what Ken Pom has on Thursday. Outside the top 200, close to 300 in the country. This is a bad free throw shooting team. There's been no debate about that. Bad free throw shooting team. If you let St. Mary's outscore you by 10 at the stripe, I think you're in a world of hurt in terms of winning this basketball game. Gonzaga cannot shoot worse than 62%, which is what they shot last time, yet they're going to have to try to shoot free throws in a hostile environment, which tends to be a lot trickier. Meanwhile, you cannot do it. We had Davis Fogel foul Liam Campbell at the half court line, and he got 3 free throws. You all remember that? That's how the half ended in Spokane. You can't have those kind of fouls. You can't have a Smiley Diani jumping out on screens and fouling 3-point shooters, which also happened in that game. You have to be careful. You have to not let St. Mary's bait you into fouls, get you in the air on pump fakes, because they will convert at the free throw line 90+% of the time, and that will bury you if you are not careful. Well, folks, there's more than just pride on the line in Moraga on Saturday night. We're going to discuss the stakes for both teams in this regular season finale coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, CoastPay is giving Locked On College listeners up to $2,000 credit for your business when you get started today. If you manage a crew like construction, HVAC, landscaping, any operation with trucks on the road, you already know how messy gas and materials spending can get. Cards get shared, receipts disappear, and month end turns into a headache. CoastPay fixes all of that. CoastPay is the modern fuel card and expense management tool built specifically for fleets. Fuel, maintenance, materials, all on one card with real control and instant visibility. Every transaction shows up the moment it happens. There's no surprises. If someone fuels up at an odd time or tries to buy something outside their limit, you'll know instantly. Real-time alerts so you always know who's spending what and where. Automatic receipt capture makes month end simple. Work anywhere visa is accepted, no detours to specific stations. It's built for operators who don't have time to chase paperwork. And unlike old fuel cards, there are no contracts or commitments, just smarter expense control. And right now, CoastPay is offering our listeners up to $2,000 credit when you get started at coastpay.com/lockedoncollege. Go to coastpay.com/lockedoncollege to see how you can earn up to $2,000 in credit. Terms apply. The Coast Visa commercial credit card is issued by Celtic Bank. All cards accounts are subject to credit approval. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. And we're talking real-time implications for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs, Randy Bennett and the St. Mary's Gaels on this game on Saturday night in Moraga. And as we have said, virtually every show this week, but I will reiterate, Gonzaga's win over Portland was significant in the sense that it has clinched 2 things for Gonzaga. It has clinched at least a share of the regular season title. But what it has also clinched is Gonzaga getting the #1 seed in the West Coast Conference Tournament. And on the show on Wednesday night after the Portland game, we recorded that show while the game between between St. Mary's and Santa Clara was going on. Since that game has happened, and St. Mary's beat the absolute tar out of Santa Clara in the second half of that game, outscoring them by over 20, we now know the specifics of what this means. Gonzaga is 16-1 in the WCC right now. St. Mary's is 15-2. Simply put, St. Mary's wins this game, they tie Gonzaga in the WCC. Gonzaga still wins in the sense that they still have the regular season title and they still get the #1 seed in the West Coast Conference Tournament, but they would be tied for the regular season title. St. Mary's has won the last 3, at least a share of the last 3 WCC regular seasons. They won the last 2 outright. They tied with Gonzaga 3 years ago. So if St. Mary's beats Gonzaga on Saturday, it will be 4 years in a row where the Gaels have at least a share of the West Coast Conference title. That is a big, big deal for St. Mary's. Big deal for them. It may not feel like as big of a deal for Gonzaga, but I think they would certainly like for their last year in the WCC to be them winning the regular season outright and not just winning a share of the regular season title. Even if, again, if St. Mary's were to beat Gonzaga and they were to finish tied, The tiebreaker would be first head-to-head, which they would have split, of course. And then it would be who had a better record against the next best team in the conference. That would be Santa Clara. St. Mary's and Santa Clara split in the regular season. Gonzaga swept Santa Clara in the regular season. That is why they would be the number 1 seed in the WCC tournament, regardless of whether they lose this game to St. Mary's or not. So that may feel like there's not quite as much at stake for Gonzaga. And to an extent, that is true. Gonzaga finishes first place in the WCC and with the number 1 seed, regardless of what happens on Saturday. St. Mary's does not. Now, St. Mary's is guaranteed to get the number 2 seed in the WCC tournament. That's already locked in. Gonzaga is locked in as the 1 seed. St. Mary's is locked in as the 2 seed. Santa Clara is locked in as the 3 seed. Nothing that happens on Saturday will change that. That is an important caveat as well. St. Mary's is not moving anywhere in the WCC tournament, but a win on Saturday determines whether they actually finish second in the WCC or they finish tied for first and just get the number 2 seed. It's a distinction without a huge difference in the sense that it doesn't really matter, but I'm sure that it matters to the Gaels. And again, I'm sure that it matters to the Zags as well. Obviously, outside of that, Gonzaga would love to win their last game in Moraga. The flip side, of course, being that St. Mary's would love nothing more than to send Gonzaga out of the WCC with a loss. Like, this game means a ton to that program. I don't know if there's this feeling of jiltedness or anything of that nature. I would imagine that the majority of St. Mary's fans would understand Gonzaga's decision to leave for the Pac-12. And certainly for St. Mary's, the odds of this helping them in some ways. It doesn't help to lose 2 to 3 quad 1 games every single year, certainly for a team like the Gaels that struggles to schedule quad 1 games, but it opens up the path to them winning the WCC on a regular basis pretty significantly. The path to an automatic qualifying bid is much easier without Gonzaga in the league, even though St. Mary's has been in a spot where they can finish second in the WCC and still make the tournament. And now going forward, that might be a bit more difficult without as many quality matchups in league play. Regardless, those are some of the basic implications for this game. But I think other significant implications for both teams revolve around the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga right now is fairly well locked in as a 3 seed. And I say locked in, it's not even March yet. Selection Sunday is over 2 weeks away. Nothing is locked. Nothing is set in stone at this point. I mean, Michigan, Arizona, and Duke are all pretty much as close to locked in as 1 seeds as you can possibly be. But nothing is truly set in stone. Gonzaga right now is trending towards a 3 seed. If they win this game, I think that the odds of them dropping below a 3 seed become very, very small. Because you would play somebody in the WCC tournament that's not Santa Clara or St. Mary's in the first round. It'll be Oregon State, Pacific, Washington State, whomever they play in that first round game. That would be a quad 3 game, most likely. Losing that game would be bad. I don't think that will happen, in which case if Gonzaga then advances to the WCC championship game, if they beat St. Mary's on Saturday and then lose in the WCC championship to either St. Mary's or Santa Clara, I still think they get a 3 seed. That would be a 3-loss Gonzaga team. They would be 7-2 in quad 1 games. They would have the quad 3 loss to Portland, sure, but I think that is still a 3 seed. It would depend a little bit on what teams like Florida and Kansas and Nebraska and Illinois and other teams that are in that conversation do the rest of the year. But I think the odds are very, very high that Gonzaga would be a 3 seed, basically if they win on Saturday in Moraga. If they do not, if Gonzaga loses to St. Mary's on Saturday, and we assume they still win that first game in the WCC tournament, and then advance to the championship against either St. Mary's or Santa Clara, which to me, that feels like a toss-up. Either way, that'll be a quad 1 game. But if Gonzaga loses at St. Mary's and also loses to either St. Mary's or Santa Clara, I think you're looking at a team that is very likely not a 3 seed and is probably a 4 or even possibly a 5. Whether that's fair or not for a team that would be a 4-loss team, probably be at least a 4 seed. But I think that becomes a bit riskier. I think the 3 seed is likely not in the picture for the Zags anymore. And on the flip side of that, if Gonzaga wins their next 3 games, they win in Moraga, they win both their games in Las Vegas, I think a 2 seed is possible. They will be a 2-loss team. 31-2 They would be 8-1 in quad one games, assuming all their quad one games that are currently there stick, which Arizona State's hovering right on the line. But they're 6-1 right now. You beat St. Mary's and Moraga. You beat either St. Mary's or Santa Clara in Vegas. You're 8-1, or worst case 7-1 in quad one with just 2 losses. I think that might be a 2 seed. It's no worse than a 3 seed for sure. So for Gonzaga, the seeding implications here are significant because if you drop into the 4 seed, now you got to play a 1 seed a round earlier. And those 1 seeds are tough, man. It's Arizona, Michigan, Duke, and then either UConn or maybe Iowa State or Houston, somebody else will be there. Either way, those are really, really good teams. You get a 2 seed or a 3 seed, you're playing somebody that you have a chance to beat. I'm not sure I'm feeling real confident about Gonzaga sans Braden Huff, but he might be back. If he's back, I feel like Gonzaga can advance past the Sweet 16. But if they have to play a 1 seed in the Sweet 16, those odds go down quite a bit. Meanwhile, for St. Mary's, this is not an elimination game. St. Mary's is the fact that they just trounced Santa Clara puts them in a pretty comfortable spot, but they don't have a quad one win. 0-3 in quad one games as of Thursday. Virginia Tech was a quad one game on Wednesday. They were 50th, and St. Mary's played them on a neutral site, which means they had to stay top 50. They dropped 3 spots to 53. Now it's a quad 2 game. So it's possible that Virginia Tech, if they have a strong run in the ACC tournament, will become a quad 1 win for St. Mary's. But right now it's not. They need this game in Moraga. You lose this game, you drop to 0-4 in quad 1. The rest of St. Mary's resume is still strong enough that they're going to get an automatic bid, or they're going to get an at-large bid. Excuse me. They're going to. I would be shocked, stunned if they didn't. It would require them losing to Gonzaga and losing to Santa Clara in their first game in the WCC tournament and failing to advance. If that happens, I do think it's possible that they're on the bubble, but even then, I think that at least still be a play an 11 seed. I think more likely St. Mary's ends up as an 8-9 seed. But if you win this game on Saturday, I think that could push you up into that 7 seed conversation. And similar to the conversation we had about Gonzaga, the difference between being a 7 seed or a 9 seed is significant. And there's a whole extra round before you have to play a top seeded team. And that's really valuable for St. Mary's. There's other things at stake here. I think the WCC Player of the Year race could sort of be determined here. I think Graham Ike is at this point a fairly heavy favorite. He's averaging 1 more point per game than Morauskas, about a rebound more per game. He's averaging more assists. He's shooting more effectively from the field, more effectively from 3, albeit it's very close. All of those stats are very, very close between Ike and Morauskas. But if Gonzaga wins this game and Gonzaga sweeps St. Mary's and Santa Clara, there's no chance Ike doesn't win Player of the Year. Truly, there's no chance. I would put his odds at 99.9 infinity % of winning the WCC Player of the Year. If St. Mary's wins, I still think it might be Ike. But if St. Mary's wins and Morauskas has 25 or 30, then I think that conversation changes. One game shouldn't switch it that much, but these guys are really close right now. And I think that would make it at least a fight, at least a conversation, whereas a Gonzaga win, I think basically cements Graham Ike as the WCC Player of the Year. There's some Coach of the Year implication here as well, although if I'm being perfectly honest, I think Herb Sendek should win Coach of the Year, and I'm not sure that this game will even determine that or factor into that at this point. I think it'll be Sendek, maybe few if they win this game because they'll have only lost 1 game in the WCC, but that's going to have some implication here as well. Obviously not a driving factor. Neither few nor Bennett would tell you this matters to them at all, and I think they would be telling you the truth, but it at least is something that is an implication of this game potentially on Saturday. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast and for this week and for shows during the WCC regular season on this podcast. Of course, very excited to have a recap show after the game on Saturday night. Should be a really, really fun one in Moraga. Thanks again, folks, for making the show your first listen or watch of the day. And of course, as always, go Zags.